What's going on? It's Monday. That means it's time for the Lethal Collective. I'm here with Craven, Fate, Jerome, and the rest of you guys in the live chat.
That's me.
Yeah. I figured that. How's it going, gentlemen?
Wonderful.
Great.
Good.
Good to be here.
All right. So today we're going to continue going into some really interesting conversation. And the question today is, do you believe? And I'm not talking about the guy in the Lost Boys who still believes. I'm talking about, do we believe in aliens? And we're going to talk about that. For you guys in the chat, thank you for being here. Sarah, what's going on? Good to see you.
Sarah.
The queen in the chat.
She is
That's
here.
right. That's right. We got Wayne in the chat. What's going on, Wayne? We got Julie. Hey, Julie.
Hey,
Jake,
Julie.
not Jeremy. What?
No
Jeremy,
one can get my name
Jerome,
right.
Joe, Jalou.
Jalou, I like that one.
I'm throwing out anything. Bobby, what's up? Val, what's up? Denisha is in the chat. What's up, Denisha? All right.
Nice. Oh, yeah.
So, guys, we decided from last week's conversation, which was really interesting, and it went all over the place, and we thought about talking some alien stuff, conspiracies, or our thoughts on it. So how about if we just start right off to kind of calibrate this stream and talk about our thoughts on aliens or their existence or theories or whatever, as far as what do we believe? Okay, I'll start off. I think aliens and the whole idea of existence of life, quote unquote, out there has always been a fascinating thing for me since I was a little kid. I grew up on sci-fi. I grew up on Star Trek and Star Wars and E.T. and all that different type of stuff. So for me, it's always been an interesting subject and a conversation that I've had with many people over the years. There's been so many different stories and shows and documentaries over the years that have intrigued me. So I will say this for me is that I believe it's hard to imagine that there couldn't be life out there. Now, have I ever seen an alien? No. Have I ever seen a UFO? No, not even close. But I think of myself as a very creative person, and my mind kind of works in weird ways. So if someone were to say, do I believe that there's a possibility of alien life out there, I would say yes. And later on, my particular story or conversation I want to throw at you guys has really, really been intriguing for me in the last, whatever it's been, several months, year or so. So anyways, that's my long-winded answer. How about you, Jerome? KillJoy Jerome.
KillJoy Jerome believes in aliens. I am all about it. I, too, have not had an experience with aliens myself. Haven't gotten probed yet. But what I will say, I'm open to it. I mean, listen, if the aliens are listening to this, yeah, why not? Sure.
Bring in spicy mustard.
He's like, oh no,
That's right.
please don't.
Oh no, I'm just in the middle of the woods. I'm just like bent over. I'm like, oh, jeez. What a shame.
He's on the top of his roof at the same time every night.
I'm just completely naked. I'm oiled up. I'm like, I'm right here. Come on, guys. No, but fresh asshole right here. No, but what were we talking about aliens again? I don't even. I forgot.
If anyone clips that out,
cleansed, man, cleanse it. Wow.
We're 4 minutes into this. We're already talking about buttholes. Damn. No, but I this is a point that gets brought up way too often, but I'm going to bring it up again. I got to be that guy who brings it up. Probability alone suggests that there's more life out there besides just us. We can't see that much into the universe. You know, assumably it goes on for fucking forever. So like, there's got to be something else out there. There's got to be some other life, other aliens, little green men running around on a planet somewhere that are really interested in butt sex. I don't know. Look, I don't know what's going on out there. I don't judge aliens, but are they out there? I believe
strong.
so.
Wow.
Yeah, some good fucking coffee. Let's say that.
They seem to have a fascination, that's for sure.
But Fate, how do you feel about aliens, my dude?
Jake. Oh, that's it. You're done with the booty.
That's all. Yeah, yes.
Oh,
My answer is yes. I just wanted to talk about probing. That's all. That's really all I'm here
That
for.
was hilarious. He's like, "Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
That's all
Are
you
you
got?"
Are you shocked? That's all I wanted.
I still have no idea what Jake's answer is. He just wants to get probed. That's what
I just want to be
pro.
yeah.
I can help you. You want me to help you? Just ask.
Wow.
You're not an alien, bro. I don't. Only
I'm your
aliens
boy.
I give my consent to. So there's.
Well, are we sure about that?
Are we
Either
sure
are we
about that?
sure?
I mean, do we really know?
It's a mystery, just like aliens. I guess.
Yeah,
I guess
I
just
know.
like that. It's a mystery.
Wow.
Man.
But,
Wow, that really brought a
yeah,
silence.
as far as the
You stopped the whole show, bro.
A
Like, there's
silence
no-
befalls.
Hey, look, how can anyone follow that?
Wow.
I'm gonna chill out. Sorry, guys. Goddamn.
don't worry, I got
Okay.
it. So, no, so likewise, I've never had an experience personally, but out of like all the like supernatural, paranormal type things, that is the one thing that like I believe in. Just probability standpoint, just like if there's so much space out there, right? Like if there's nothing, to me that just seems like such a waste of space, right? You'd think that there'd be something. And like I don't know if they're little green men, I don't know if they look like us, I don't know if they're reptilian, I don't know what they are, right? But like even just like down to a finite point, like even if they found like a germ or something, that's alien life, that's some form of alien life that could lead us to maybe other things. For all we know, there could be entire worlds that have like other life forms. And in our thought process as far as it goes is like, oh, it has to be a planet that's habitable based on the conditions that are similar to Earth. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other planets that have life that are just adaptable to those conditions, right? We are under because you have to have a starting point from a scientific perspective. You have to have a starting point from a discovery perspective. So we basically, for our seeable universe, what we can visualize at the moment, there seems to be no sign of life on any of the planets that aren't similar to ours. So that's what we're basing it on. And as we get further and further into space, we're starting to find planets that are very similar to our planet, and that's kind of the hopes that like, hey, this might be a habitable planet one day when we're able to get a microscope or whatever that can get into the actual planet and to visualize it, or get a probe there or whatever. At some point, maybe we'll have that understanding. But there's also the possibility that there is life in other planets that aren't and are considered habitable, similar to ours. That could also be why life hasn't came to our planet, right? Now, I don't know. There's a lot of credible people that have, came out and said that there is something, whether that's, little green men walking around working with the government and stuff like that, all the conspiracy theories, all the ideas, stuff that I don't know. Is it possible? Sure. I like I say, I always subscribe to the I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of things the government knows and is privy to that we'll never be privy to, right? Because for security purposes, for just people's sanities, things like that. There is that form of like, if people don't like what people don't know won't hurt them, right? There are a lot of people that if certain things started to become a reality, that changes a lot. So I do understand to a point that like some things are going to be there, but like I said, there's so many like credible people, from like generals to Air Force people to scientists to all kinds of stuff that have talked to. I mean, Bob Lazar, right? I mean, they tried to discredit this guy 1,000 times, and he's been right every time. I mean, literally, science, technology that they said was sci-fi and oh, this guy's just a loon, to like years later, it's like, oh yeah, that actually existed. Like, how does he just guessed the exact type of thing? Like, so there has to be something there. So there's definitely to some degree something. I just don't know if that's like aliens have came. I mean, even UFOs and stuff, right? There could be UFOs. Right? If you're an advanced alien civilization, are you sending people or are you sending like drones? Right. So for all we know, the UFOs could be drones. I mean, there's so many different possibilities out there. I will say one thing though: if aliens do exist, obviously they're relatively peaceful because if they weren't, they could just wipe us out. I mean, we can barely get out of our own orbit, let alone travel light years or bend space and time and stuff. Like we would be helpless. We would be totally helpless if they wanted to do something. Like there's nothing. And then as far as like alien abduction goes, like it makes sense, right? Because like think of us as a species, right? What do? We pluck things out of various habitats to study them and understand them and experiment on them and all that stuff. Why would an alien life, some other being, not want to do the same thing? You're not going to just come in and snatch up everybody. You're not going to come in and just wipe out the planet. No, you want to study it. You want to understand it. Oh, this is life. It could be life could be a precious resource in the universe. So it's like, why would we wipe this out when this is like one of 5 known species or whatever, right? Like, so what do? You pluck it out. Like think of like an ant farm, right? It's like, we take X amount, we put them in their little ant farm and we watch them and they're crazy and they build all kinds of crazy structures and all this stuff. Very similar, right? They pluck us out, they keep us, experiment on us, try to understand us, track us, all that stuff, and then put us back into reality. Some don't, some do, some live, some die. It's how it goes. But as far as like them working with us, I mean, it does make sense to an extent because you have like, if you look at civilization, right? Like there's like a clear drop off at some point, like some unexplained, like how did we go from like nothing to like these giant structures and pyramids and Machu Picchu and all this stuff? Like, was it just lost knowledge that we will one day discover or be able to recreate, or did some other life form help us? I mean, that's what, like, maybe they have worked with us. I don't remember the scientist off the top of my head. If somebody knows or whatever, if it comes to me, I'll mention it. But he described it as like, ants on an anthill, basically, of like, we're like, to us, ants are fascinating, right? But they're insignificant. We could literally squish the anthill. So they're no threat to us. They're nothing, right? Same thing with ants. To us, we are just ants on a hill to aliens because they could just squish us, right? We pose no threat. And if they were going to help with technology, you're not going to go and put somebody into like an average person into like a stealth bomber, right? Which is one of the greatest technological machineries we've ever created, right? You're not just going to throw them in because they're going to be lost. They're not going to know how to do it. So how do you get them to that point? Okay, well, you start with, little training mods, and then you work your way up to simulations, and then you work your way up to a normal plane, like a little Cessna or something. And then you work your way up and you keep going through these scales until that person finally can do the stealth bomber. So that's the same idea and logic of like, if aliens are helping us, right? They're starting small and they're working their way up. The problem is once we understand the stealth bomber, to use the analogy, because now we become a threat to those aliens. So there's the question, kind of tying into like the Jupiter brain thing, right? Of at what point do the aliens go, okay, now they pose a threat and just wipe us out? Because we are very destructive by nature, right? We're not the kind of civilization that's like, okay, well, now we have this technology. Thank you. You can be on your way. No, we're the kind of civilization that's like, oh, now we're your equals. And what do we like to do? We like to conquer.
We like to conquer.
There is that concern of like, do we reach a point where aliens go, okay, it's time to squash this? So anyway, those are my thoughts. Those are little science information. But Craven, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's possible. Of course, I think, yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone that's being intellectually honest can say there's no way there's not something else, or at least make the claim that they know there's nothing else, because we don't have all of the knowledge. You know, God is the only one who has all knowing, omniscient, omnipotent. He knows everything. Outside of you being him, and none of us are, thankfully, we don't know. So at the very least, to be just very intellectually honest, we should at least say we don't know. It's possible. I mean, it's possible. It absolutely is. Now, I think we need to be careful though, but again, it's fun, and it's kind of what we're talking about tonight. It's fun to think about, you know, what could they be like, and thanks to the arts, we have lots of ideas and movies, and you know, we always picture alien life as very advanced. That's the default usually. We think of the spaceships, the weapons, you know, all the power and stuff that they have. But we don't, you know, just because there's life in other planets, or could be life in other galaxies out there, you know, we don't know that that's the case. They could be, you know, it could be that we're the most intelligent life form in the galaxies right now. We might be, you know, which is why we've, you know, that's why we're not being actively, at least as far as we know, we're not being invaded by anybody else. Let's put it that way. We can all agree on. So that could be because maybe we are the top of the food chain. Maybe the life out there is a more primitive type of life that exists, or could be down to literally just the cell, you know, level of life that could be growing, you know, fungus and that kind of stuff. I mean, so it's fun, but that's boring though, right? It's fun to think of the ships and the weapons, and you know, that's what we want to all talk about, because, and I do too, because it's fun, and that's what the movies shade our thinking of when it comes to aliens. Independence Day, you know. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. So, or the ET, the friendly little cute alien, you know. I mean, it's all over the place, right? But I will say this, and I'll save this for when we get into our like specific stories or what have you. But I do have something to share that it's from my actual family. Now, I wasn't involved in it, but it came from my grandma and my aunt, and they were both witness to something. So I'll save that for later, just a little tease. But at the end of the day, what I think we at least could say, we don't know. It's possible. It's at least possible, right? And you know, as far as, you know, anyone that has like, you know, a biblical worldview, for example, I mentioned this last time. You know, the Bible itself is silent on it. It doesn't say yay or nay. And so that's why, you know, there's no conflict there. If there was extraterrestrial life discovered, it would no way be at odds or in conflict with the Bible at all. That's not what the Bible's for. It's not what God created that for. But anyway, so I you know, that I say all that just to say it could be. Yeah.
Agreed.
I want to add a couple points though too. Is like, so like you think of our universe, like even just think of our planet, right? Our planet's been here for billions of years, like literally, like I think it's like 5 or 6 billion years. But like this adaptation of like, or the first adaptation of like Homo sapiens have been around for like 6 million years. So you're talking like literally like at least 10 times the amount of time that this planet has existed from our, you know, evolutionary train, to like, you're talking about all these other planets and all these other galaxies and all these other universes. I mean, the universe itself is like hundreds of billions of years old. So to think that like there's not crazy hyper advanced civilizations, again, there is very real a possibility, especially if alien life really hasn't came to our planet, then there is a possibility that we just advanced farther than everybody. Just because they've had a head start doesn't necessarily mean that they've evolved as fast as they have. But that's a lot of time between us and them, assuming that there's life out there, which, as I mentioned, I believe. So to think that there aren't like entire galaxies full of just hyper advanced civilizations. But also it comes down to like what are their belief systems, what are their, just because we're destructive by nature doesn't mean that other life is, right? There's a lot of life even in our own planet that is very, non-aggressive.
Docile.
Yeah, docile.
Right.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, stuff like that. So, I mean, there very well could be other races. I mean, just probability. Let's say that there's millions of different life forms all over the universe. There's a good chance that some of those are dominant or, destructive.
Can I throw something at that real quick?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
go ahead.
Does intelligence suggest that we get more aggressive though as we get more intelligence? Are you someone that? Okay, you don't believe that. I'm just.
No.
I always like to ask people that question because anytime I think of like the typical gray alien that's like way more intelligent than us, has, machinery that we can't even fathom. It kind of lends itself to the idea that they're like, they want to colonize, they want to, destroy all life across the universe and just take over. But you don't believe that.
No, I mean, the opposite has been proven to be true. Like where the more advanced you are, the more power you have, the less likely you are to just like, if I have more, like, you see it in certain fields like business and like, government and stuff like that. But for the most part, like if I know for a fact I could just wipe the floor with you, unless you really provoke me, I'm not going to do it. Like you look at MMA fighters, like you never see them running around just manhandling men for no reason because it's like I could just beat the living hell out of you and I like it, right? Like there's all kinds of like,
you do in WWE though.
Well, I mean, that's the combat sport. I'm talking about like
I get what you're saying. I'm fucking
walking
with you,
to the street and just start beating people up for the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right,
we're just
right.
having sanctioned street fights or something, right? You don't, because when you get to a point, you don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to, like if I have more wealth, if I have more power, if I have more control, I don't need to prove it to you, unless you give me a purpose or a reason to do that. And then once that happens, then now if we go poking the bear, what's the saying? You knock on the devil's door long enough, eventually he's going to answer. Like you do that, then it's like, now it's like, okay, well, now I need to show you, right? But if you leave things alone, and even most people by nature, if you don't bother them, they're not going to mess with you. Like even people that are in gangs or, or violent by nature, like usually there's a reason that is not, like very rarely do people just randomly go around and just start killing people. And like, look at like the most intelligent people in our existence.
But I also don't think it's random. That's the thing. Like my personal argument, I'm kind of Fade. I kind of agree with you, but I think there's an argument on both sides. You know what I mean? Like I feel like when you get to a point of such power, such intelligence, like we were talking about the Jupiter brain the other day. Like there is a lot of evidence to support that it might just want to take over us because it's so much more powerful. It's like, why not? You guys have all these resources.
Do you think it's almost like? Do you think it's almost like being kind of drunk with power and not having, not necessarily having a filter, not having a what's the word, like a guideline, a moral guideline? Because of course, who's to say if we have a different life form or whatever, who's to say that they have the same type of moral viewpoint as us? You know what I mean?
Look, there's a couple
saying.
things to that. There's a couple things to that. So one is, yes, power can be seductive. Power can be very tempting, right? But again, only in certain areas, right? Like, and if you're an advanced alien life, one, you don't want to just wipe everybody out because then there's nothing left, right? And like even us, we don't wipe out. Like we could wipe out every life on this planet if we want to do, but we choose not to, right? Even back in the conquering days and stuff like that, it was just different times, different mindsets, different beliefs. Like as we've become more civil and more advanced, like just look through history. History will give you the answer, right? The more we've evolved, the more that we have grown, the smarter and more advanced we have gotten, the less that these type of conquests and power grabs and stuff. But there are still like money. People still want money, power of control over a nation, things like that. But you don't see Joe Biden rallying up the troops and going, let's just go conquer the world, right? And we have
But there's
the
so
power.
many factors for why that is. You know, I mean, there's so much
Yes.
geopolitical consequences that would come from that. Now, here's the thing, though: if
But there would
aliens
be in a
flew
universal
by,
sense. There would be in a
but
universal sense.
hear me out on this: if aliens come by on a flying saucer and they see our planet, and they're leagues ahead of us in intelligence wise and technology wise, whatever, we're just an anthill, like you were talking about earlier. And if ants get
Right.
in your house, what do? You leave poison out, and then they take it because they're stupid, and just like us, who are very primitive in nature compared to something like what I'm talking to. I think they would just wipe us out. Be like, these guys are killing this planet. Let's let's fuck them up. Let's take all their resources. I don't know. I feel like I'm very much so in the middle on this argument. I just feel like there's really good reason for both, depending on the personalities and backgrounds of whoever these aliens could be.
Oh, of course. I mean, like I
talk
said,
about this shit all day. Love this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a probability. There's definitely a probability that there's some life out there that would want to conquer. But like you said, there would be consequences throughout the universe as well. And it's very likely that just like us, there's not one superpower of the universe.
Yes,
so there would
absolutely.
be galactic wars. There would be conflicts. I mean, and maybe there are. I mean, who knows? I mean, there could be a real life Star Wars somewhere in the universe. I don't know. Like, I only have the information that we have in real time. But you brought up like the ant argument. Yes, if some high-powered, capable of wiping us out and conquering us, right, like flew by, what is the point in doing that? We don't serve any purpose for them.
Resources. We have water, we have gold,
Yes,
we have so much
you're
shit
going
that
off-
aliens would
you're,
want.
You're assuming that those resources have any effect. If they are that advanced,
That's a good point, too.
They don't care about our resources. They could probably replicate water. They could probably create their own sun. They could probably, and us as people, we're so insignificant. We're so weak, like flimsy compared to like what could be out there, that we literally would serve no purpose. Using your ant example, you look at an anthill. Yes, we can squash the ant. You could walk by every anthill. You, as just a normal person, no guns, no weapons, no nothing. You could walk by and just stomp out an anthill easily and just go, ha ha, I conquered you. But you don't do that. People don't do that. Like, because what's the point? It's meaningless. It does nothing other than just you're mad.
If the ants had a bunch of shit that I wanted, though, I might step on it.
But then that's a completely
If I drop my Eggo waffle in the middle of a park and ants are about to come towards it, dude, I'm stepping on all of them. I mean, we don't have this theoretical Eggo waffle I'm talking about,
that's
but
us.
if
But
we
as I
were
mentioned-
to,
But as I mentioned earlier, you're not gonna, if you poke the bear, then the bear is going to attack. If we're on this planet just minding our own business, there is no reason realistically that they need to conquer us. And even if they did, let's say that they needed our water, right? Let's say that they're like, oh man, they have salt water, that's a high resource in the universe, whatever, or gold. Gold is a real theory. A lot of people think that aliens are here mining gold. Okay, if they were mining gold, right, and they could get gold, then why wouldn't they just come and take our gold? We literally would be helpless to stop them. They don't even need to wipe us out. They could just step aside, kid, and we're just going to take this and we'll be on our merry way. And we would be helpless. Like, there's no real reason to conquer us and just obliterate us, unless that's literally their only purpose. Like, we just want to, they're serial killers. They're just like, hey, let's see what happens if we blow
Or
this
testing
planet up.
technology
Yeah, exactly.
to
Unless
say,
we're like
hey,
a
we want to
test-
see
unless
what
we're like a
happens.
testing zone or something like that. But even then, wouldn't you test it on, a non-planet first? Like, and there's a million planets, or not million planets, but there's several planets in our solar system that they could test those weapons on. My point is that, like, unless there is real reason to, like, we start poking the bear, which is a concern if we start exploring space and we start colonizing planets and stuff like that, because then at that point they could look at it as like, okay, these people are starting to tread on territory, right?
They're getting too big for their britches.
Yeah, they're getting too big for the britches, and that's a point. But as of right now, there is no reason. If they needed resources, they could just come and take the resources. Like, they don't even need us. Like, we would be too slow for them, right? For us to be their slaves, just mining gold, would probably be a slower process than them. If they can create space travel and technology that just rivals ours, when we have machinery that can mine gold and stuff like that without humans, you got to imagine that they could just come in and just essentially suck it all up. and just say, here you go. Like, where's all the gold at? All right, we're coming to take this. Like,
so you're assuming it's either one or two things. It's either they are out there, they don't want to disturb our like everything going on politics wise in our world yet, and maybe they have encountered us, whatever, or they just haven't at all. And that's really the only two possibilities. Otherwise, our world would already be destroyed, kind of. Or
well, one, why would, like, from an alien standpoint, why would we care, or why would they care about our politics and our way of life?
Because maybe they are like altruistic, like what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Maybe they do have that good sense of like, we want to bring these people into the galaxy and all that shit.
We think of what we do.
They don't want to disturb that.
Things in ecosystems, right? Like, you don't like. There's a big, like, conscious effort of like, hey, we don't want to disrupt certain ecosystems. And early in time, we did that, and we realized, oh, that's a bad thing. There's also the possibility that they're like, we don't want to disrupt their ecosystem, but we do want to understand them. We do want to know what makes them tick. We do want to know how to take them out if there's ever that possibility. It's where like abduction and stuff like that could come in. Again, this is going on the assumption that they've ever even came here. Like, we don't know for a fact. It's not like, Akbar from planet Zetar came down and was like, I am from, like, we have no real, like, we're just assuming. We're just assuming. But I mean, even if you look through history, you have all kinds of hieroglyphics and just like monuments and all kinds of stuff that resemble something making contact to Earth.
From the sky.
But yeah, from the sky. It's just, again, it just, even if they're, and even, because we're looking at things from a human perspective, right? This is all we have to go off of. Like, who's to say aliens have all of our emotions and senses? They could be emotionless beings. There's a real possibility that at some point we'll become that through just advancements, technology, stuff like that, where we basically just become this like essential robot. Where if a civilization is that advanced, there's a huge possibility that they are that. Maybe they were compassionate, maybe they were destructive, maybe they were these things at one point, but just through the evolutionary chain and just through everything, they don't have those receptors to where it's like, oh, they're just like, they look at things based on science or, statistics or what could be the worst possible outcome. And it's like, if we tamper with this, that could be destructive. That could ruin, the ecosystem that they live in. And again, there could be a million reasons. It could be precious life, or life could be precious in the universe. Maybe there are only like X amount of lives. Maybe there was a galactic war at some point that wiped out 90% of the universe in its population. Again, universe has been around a lot longer than we have. I mean, you could have had several universal wars. And I mean, we've had, two in our like modern civilization? Right. And that's not counting all of the various wars throughout history between, the Romans and all that stuff. I mean, you're talking, put that in a scale that is billions and hundreds of billions of years with other galaxies and universes. They might have just came to the conclusion of we should stop wiping out each other as we did. Go ahead.
Well, since we're about halfway through this, let's talk about Sarah's super chat. Sarah, thank you so much for that.
Yes.
And we also have some
Sarah.
fun stories to share. So let's get on into that next. I'm excited.
Yes. Sarah coming in with a super chat, and saying, hardest for me is light years. If there are aliens in another galaxy, when they look at us, they're not seeing what we look like now. They'd be seeing what we look like based on how far away that they are.
Yeah.
So
Wow, that is
this.
awesome.
I can
That is
answer
awesome.
this. So there's a couple things about that. So one, yes, we're perceiving the idea of visualizing light years. So for example, like, we've seen the creation of the universe. We've seen it through light coming in through our telescopes. Like, we can see pretty much the beginning of existence to an extent, right? We could basically see remnants of the Big Bang and stuff like that, just because the light travels through the universe. So the thing is, though, too, is you're looking at a perspective of our telescopes, our technology. If you had an advanced civilization, they could have a telescope that could, in real time, visualize and see everything. Because again, you're talking about if there really is this far advanced civilization that is able to come here and travel light years, right? Then you got to imagine, like, put it in perspective for us. We can see light years into the universe, but we can't travel light years into the universe. If we could travel light years into the universe, imagine what we could see, right? So if you put that in perspective, the possibility of them being able to see us just in real time, is not that unfathomable. The other thing is too is that like as far as like if they do come here, then a lot of it is if you go off of like Bob Lazar and what many scientists have said, that they basically just create like wormhole. They basically just wrap space and time around them, so they are essentially teleporting. They're basically moving from here to here, and it's why like you see UFOs and they're like over here one minute, and then they're like in Costa Rica the next, and then they're like in Chile the next, and because they're not moving on a plane front, back, side to side. They're moving in instances. Like
another
dimension. Instead of moving through space and time, they are warping space and time and moving around them. But so I mean, yes, from our perspective, if we found alien life today, chances are that alien life is either non-existent or they are so far advanced from the moment we saw them, because we're seeing them literally hundreds of years earlier. Right. So, so I hope that helps clarify.
Yeah. And Sarah had a second part with another super chat. So thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate that. So this was a second part to what she was saying if they're 65 million light years away, they'd be looking at the light reflected off the Earth 60 million years ago. And why would they want to come and visit what looks like an empty rock?
Yeah.
Well, I think, kind of like what you were saying. Yeah.
Filled with monsters and dinosaurs and shit. Like, fuck that. Yeah, I'm good.
Well,
that's true.
Also, too, it's assuming that their telescopes and stuff also use light fragments to see, right? I mean, they could just literally just go through. I mean, even us as humans are we only see there is all kinds of stuff going around us right now. Different light particles that our eyes can't detect and pick up, right? That's why we created technology that can, right? Like the eyes are very limited in what we can visually see. Like even got people that are 20/20 vision can't see even a percentage of what is actually going around. You can't see all the particles, you can't see all the atoms, you can't see anything. So, it's very possible because we've invented technology that can see all kinds of stuff and look at atoms and, take atoms apart and do all kinds of crazy sci-fi stuff. So to think that another civilization hasn't came to that conclusion, and that's also assuming that they're bound by the same laws that we are. The consensus is that yes, there are these laws of the universe, but we as a civilization are trying to figure out how can we trick that? How can we manipulate that? Is there a way? Who's to say another civilization didn't? Who's to say, again, the idea of UFOs and aliens literally defy all scientific logic, all laws of gravity, all laws of physics, all laws of everything. So if what we know to be aliens is true, then they're not governed by the same body that we are as far as the universe goes. So that's something else as well.
All right. And Sarah, thank you so much for both of those super chats. Very, very amazing of you. And we truly appreciate it. Seriously.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So how about this? And Jake, you were just saying it. How about if we take a little bit of time going into our own little stories that we wanted to share, or at least discuss, it may not be necessarily stories. It might be just things that we've seen on the news or whatever. I'll just start off because Fate, you already mentioned it a little bit, but one of the things in the last couple of years that has been really interesting to me is the whole story of Bob Lazar. His background, the things that he has talked about, and also kind of like the stories that intertwine with him. I don't know if you guys have seen that documentary. I believe it's on Netflix. The Area 51 and all of that. To me, it's really interesting because his story, when I've heard him talk about it, his story is it's absolutely crazy because he was a part of a group. he worked at this place that's near Area 51, and he was part of a group, from what he said, and this was in the 80s. I think it was like the mid 80s, but he was part of a group that was said to work on reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. Now, that sounds crazy, right? And when I first started to hear about his story, I'm like, "Yep, okay, that's really really interesting." But then, as his story kind of went further, he talked about how there was a craft that he worked on, and he talked about it in terms that I usually didn't hear from a lot of other people. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't like, "Oh yeah, it was a cool spaceship, and we were," he was just talking about it, because he's a scientist, he's a man of science. So he was talking about it in ways that really struck me. He was talking about how there was this element that they had found that they were working on, and it was something that
Element
had not.
118.
Yes, and it was something that was not found on the periodic table yet. And years later, it was discovered. So, in other words, there were things that he talked about in the 80s that eventually, like in the 2000s, I think it was like the mid 2000s that it was actually discovered, like that came to pass. So, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is, and you guys can let me know what you think, what I'm saying is there were a lot of things that he talked about 40 years ago that came to pass, whatever, 30 years later. And it's kind of like, well, how would he know that unless there was something to his story? I'm not saying that everything that he talked about, because he actually said that there was not just one craft or a piece or part of a craft that they were working on near Area 51. But to your point too, Fate, he was basically blackballed. you know he was trying to be shut up by the government. His personal life was destroyed, and so forth and so
Added to
forth.
his
So
credibility.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like, even his background was altered. You know what I mean?
yeah,
um
really
they
white.
could they couldn't even find evidence of him working on this particular project with this particular group. And from what I understand, there was a way that he was able to prove it, because there was someone who had a
He had people
newspaper
come out.
clipping. Yeah,
Yeah.
people came out, and
So
there was a
yeah, he
newspaper
had people.
clipping showing that he did.
Yeah. So a couple things about Bob Lazar too. One, um, he's never seeked financial gain from this, which is a good sign. Usually, I mean,
Right.
even like stories like Betty and Barney Hill and stuff like that, we're doing all kinds of stuff, right? He said what he had to say, and then he basically just left it alone, right?
Mm,
Never tried to seek gain, never tried to make any money. His story has also never changed. And he never tried to say stuff that he didn't like. You see a lot of these whistleblowers, they'll talk about something and then they'll talk about like things like secondhand that they didn't even
mhm.
work on. Like Bob Lazar regularly when would be asked questions. I mean, go look at like the Joe Rogan interview. Joe Rogan's asking him all kinds of
Yeah.
questions. He's like, I'm not familiar, right? Like, oh, but somebody said you saw alien life. No, I saw something sitting that didn't look human, but it was just walking through. Like, he's never tried to like lean in and elaborate a story, right? He's never tried to, exaggerate the story. He's just kind of like, here's what I did, here's what I worked on, here are the people I worked on it with. And then, they tried to discredit him. People came out and were like, no, he worked at S4. Like, he had evidence and credentials, all kinds of stuff for S4. He talked about the hand scan thing that they said was complete nonsense and sci-fi. And then in like 2002, it turned out that was a real thing that they still were using. That was
Mhm.
obsolete technology. And you had people at other government facilities that were like, hey, we have that thing in our thing, right? But yet they
Mm.
were trying to say it was sci-fi, right? Element 118 was something that was completely nonsense and they said was, unrealistic. And then, fast forward 30 years and what was it, 2012 or 2018, something like that, it got put on the periodic table. So now element 118 exists. It's like the more that they've tried to discredit the man, the more that he's been right. And what
Right.
I always think is funny too is the government. Like, if the government just left it alone, Bob Lazar probably wouldn't even be a thing. Most people would
Right.
just look at him as some kook that just, he said some nonsense and people would have moved on. But the
Mhm.
fact that they kept, like, literally in that documentary with George Knapp and what's the other guy's name? I'm blanking on the other guy's name. But like, they're literally documenting him, and the FBI shows up and starts raiding his house. Like, and they're like all they kept doing was just kept adding credibility to him. Where if they just left it alone, right? Like he has like videos of like literally FBI agents like standing outside in vans of his house, like raiding his house, trying to find documents, all kinds of stuff. It's like if the FBI was just like, or the government was like, he's just some weirdo and just like left it alone and ignored it, like he probably like nobody would have done anything. Like even his like revelations about like the technology and like the the element and all that stuff, most people probably wouldn't even put two and two together because he would have been just such a lost person to history. But
right.
When the government starts, when you start saying stuff and you're saying the government's hiding this stuff, and then the government tries to shut you up, it's like, okay, so I guess he was right? It's like, it's silly. But anyway, yeah, the Bob Lazar story is just crazy.
It really is.
It is. It's amazing how constant he's been and how right he's been. Like there's nothing that he's talked about that has been proven infactual. And a lot of people have tried. Go ahead, Jake.
It's stories like that that really make you question, like, if there's some kind of interference with like the government and all that with aliens. They know something we don't. I feel like it's impossible for them not to know something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, there's just been so much weird shit over just the last like 50 years, even beyond that, of course. But I don't know. There's got to be something going on. Something. I don't know what that is. I don't know if we're all doomed in a couple of years here. Even recently, there's been updates. Like, remember the thing in like Mexico City or whatever with the alien bodies coming up? What was up with that? Is that a hoax? It got national coverage, dude.
No, they were proven to be fake.
That was proven to be a hoax?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot. Look, the government is recognized. What is true though is the government is recognizing that there is something out there. They're not denying it. What's up with that? This was recent news that did not get proven false. I know that for sure. So I don't know, man. Something's going on. I don't like it. Where's the aliens? Show me the alien people. Let's all hang out, smoke a doobie, see what happens.
There's got to be something out there, right? Like there's got to be something going on. Now, I do absolutely think like 99.9% of things are just human government. I mean, especially out in those testing sites and stuff, right? I mean, you got to think the stealth bomber is over 100 years old. Could you imagine what people thought when they first saw that thing? This triangular shape craft that just floated up. Of course, like, so they're and they say the government is 10 to 20 years more advanced technologically than we are. Like a lot of our technology that we have today was already used by the government years ago. And then it's like, okay, well, now you can release this to the public. Okay, now you can release this to the public. I have people that I know that have told me that it's even farther, that they're like closer to 100 years advanced. I don't know how true that is. It's just, people telling me stuff, but but regardless, like there's got to be something. So I think most of the things we see are human crafts, that they're not like, they're not just going to come out and be like, yep, that was us. Right. Like, no, because it's obviously top secret. They would rather you believe it's some alien craft rather than like, oh, we have this crazy advanced technology. Right. So we definitely, and we have sci-fi stuff that would blow people's mind in the government. The government definitely knows and has things that we would probably just not believe, just because that's their job, right? To stay ahead of the game, stay ahead of the curve. Why is the U.S. such a superpower? Because we're always ahead, right? Like you had the arms race, you had even like the space race, right? All that stuff. So like I definitely think there is, but it's that like 0.1% of like just strange things where you have like Air Force generals that are like, dude, like I am privy to like everything, and we don't have anything like this. Like, those are the guys that I'm like, okay, there's got to be something going on here. There's got to be something to this space stuff. But yeah,
that's what I think too, man. Jake, how about you?
So I have a story that's a little more like, it's one that's on the fence, that can go either way. There's evidence that supports both sides of it, which I thought would be kind of interesting. We could see everyone have hopefully a different opinion, which will be fun. It's more, I want to talk about the Cisco Grove UFO incident from 1964, where there's some really weird things on both ends. Like that's, once again, I can't stress this enough. That's why I chose this. Many channels on YouTube have covered it, but I thought, hey, let's throw it out there. Let's see what the gang thinks. So just to start off, my two 2-page essay I've written about this. On a Friday afternoon, in September of 1964, Donald Shrum, no, not the 45th president of the United States, Donald Shrum, and 2 of his coworkers went on a hunting expedition in Cisco Grove, California. During the season in the Tahoe Forest, guns were not allowed, but the men brought bows and arrows instead. Donald especially preferred using a bow to hunt over a gun anyways. I think he liked it more or something. I don't know if you're a hunter and you're into this kind of thing. Not really my jam, but hey, go for it, Donald. You roll, baby. After setting up camp, the men immediately fanned out, committing the biggest horror movie sin of all by splitting up. They agreed to stay within earshot, and if they got lost, they would simply return to camp. Unfortunately, Donald got lost in the woods around sunset, was unable to find his way back. Not only was he unsuccessful in his first hunt, but his friends didn't respond to him when he called. Shrum, being an experienced hunter, knew that hanging out in those woods at night could be dangerous. Bears, wildcats, and other predators like to hang out in these woods had been reported there, and the temperatures were dropping fast. So he would spend the night on a cliffside tree that he fastened himself to with a harness he had on his person. Something I want to bring up for later is that Donald was working for the government. He made missiles for them at some kind of warehouse or whatever somewhere. So he had this government issued belts that was really tight and got him to the tree. He was chilling. He would spend the night there, and then as he was fighting to stay awake, he saw something out in the distance, some light in the trees. Assuming that this was his friends on the lookout for him, Shrum began lighting signal flares and shouting out to them. As the light got closer up in the sky, Donald noticed it didn't make any noise. He thought it was a helicopter. It wasn't. There was no noise coming from this light, getting closer and closer to him. Frightened by this, Donald hid and decided to wait for the light to pass. It ended up scanning the area, moving in unnatural ways around the sky. It got close enough to Shrum that he was able to see a large black cylindrical craft, basically the size of an office building, 50 feet wide on its side. Slits of light opened up from another side of the craft, and a smaller ship emerged, getting closer to the forest grounds. Getting close up to Donald's cliff, the saucer-shaped UFO stopped and began blinking. Donald Shrum was pretty much shitting his pants at this point, not being able to believe what he saw. He was not a believer before this and had no prior knowledge on aliens besides what he saw on TV, essentially. So after the UFO disappeared, Shrum heard something coming up through the brush. I apologize for laughing, but this is kind of where it gets insane. Heading straight for him. Donald was still in the tree at this point with his bow ready. 2 humanoid beings allegedly emerged at 4 or 5 feet tall towards him wearing silver suits. It was too dark for Donald to see their faces, but he could see some sort of shiny goggles on their faces. They began collecting samples of leaves and soil around him. It was scary, but Donald just stayed quiet and hid in the tree. They eventually heard him and approached the base of the tree that he sat in. They began making what Donald described as owl sounds as a third, more mechanical figure approached. A giant robot, 6 feet tall, kind of looking like the Iron Giant, approached the tree with reddish-orange glowing eyes. It opened its mouth and a large plume of smoke shot out, hitting Donald, and he was not only frozen in fear, but his muscles wouldn't respond as he tried to move. He tried to climb up the tree, but just was paralyzed and blacked out. An uncertain amount of time later, Donald woke up, saw the being still there. He shook off the temporary paralysis and climbed further up the tree. The robot tried to engage again, but Donald shot it in the chest with a bolt from his bow. It bounced off the robot, resulting in sparks and the other humanoid creatures fleeing the scene. The robot retorted with a screeching sound and yet another plume of smoke, hitting Donald. Same thing happened. He blacked out and then came to again a couple of hours later, assumably. He woke up again. Humanoids were presumably looking for a way to get him out of the tree. They're scoping this thing out. They're how the hell do we get this guy down? He's harnessed down to the base of this thing. We can't do anything. Pissed off and fighting for his life at this point, Donald came to and began relentlessly firing off arrows at the robot. He fired until he had nothing left, and the robot persisted, shooting another plume of smoke, which made him black out once again. This would go on pretty much all night. Donald was using parts of his clothing, hats, whatever. He would light it on fire and throw it down at the things and just try to keep them away, but they just kept hitting him with plumes of smoke. At one point, 2 robots showed up apparently and were shooting this massive collective plume of smoke at his face. And finally, sunrise comes.
Wow.
Everyone's gone. They have all left at this point after just this 12-hour long fight that Donald has had. He goes back to camp, now being able to see with the daylight, uses his compass to get there. And Donald ends up telling his friends about this, who also claim to see the craft. He tells his family about the incident when he got back home, and this eventually led to some professor at a local university telling the government about all this, which is where they started an investigation on the area. Donald worked at the government missile facility, like I was talking about, which is most likely why they interrogated him as hard as they did about what happened in the woods that weekend. They asked him extensive questions on what had happened and even tried coaxing him into believing that it was all an elaborate prank from teenagers, which is like, dude, shut up. What are you talking about, bro? What? No way. Where are teenagers getting like paralysis gas, dog? What is going on with this? Donald showed the men in black an arrow he had recovered from the scene that still had like bits of metal attached to it. They took it away and it was never seen again. Ooh, spooky. Donald would end up going back to those woods where he discovered the area was roped off. Investigation had clearly taken place here as he found cigarette butts lining the caution tape and rake marks in the soil. Not being able to shake the trauma, Donald's life was ruined. No one believed his story. He lost his job and he suffered major PTSD, especially anytime he heard owl noises, the same thing coming from those humanoid creatures. It wasn't until 14 years later, though, that the story would be nationally recognized on public television with Project UFO. It was like this NBC special. And then many years later, a 2011 book was written about the incident titled Aliens in the Forest, the Cisco Grove UFO Encounter. Now, there's two things to really note according to this story. First of all, Donald never tried to capitalize it on like himself. The story was told by other people who would ask him more questions about the event and go on to do that NBC special, write that book, yada yada. On the other hand, the description of the robots is like directly 1960s, 1950s sci-fi. So it kind of comes off as, I don't know if I believe that or not. But I want to hand it off to you guys. What are your thoughts on this? I feel like there's really good arguments on both sides to say, like, yes, this was some kind of alien encounter, and also not. Knight, I want to start with you.
Okay. Once we got to the robot Olympics, that's when I started to kind of fall off the cliff a little bit here. You said it. You said it right before you asked me to give my point of view. That is the time period of what, the robots were envisioned as, you know what I'm saying? Kind of like that whole idea of the Iron Giant. That being said, before that part, I was really thinking, wow, this sounds like an account that you've heard many people make to varying degrees. And listen, if there were to be an encounter with an alien species, up until the tree point, that would make sense. Kind of scouting around, the blinking, all of that is very intriguing and somewhat believable, at least to me. That's just my opinion. But once we got into the part where he's in the tree and dealing with, trying to be captured or what have you, that just sounds so out there, because it's kind of like, well, if they can shoot out a plume of smoke that can paralyze you and so forth, it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like they're showing a lot of capability, but not as much capability as they should be able to if they're traveling through space and who knows from where. You know what I mean?
But think about this, because you're absolutely right. Like that is a great point for why this might all just be BS. But why would he do, like, if this was BS, he was making this up, why would he persist? He lost his job, like his family, didn't believe, no one else believed him except for his friends who also saw the craft. He didn't try to capitalize on this. And I feel like if you're making up a story like this, that's kind of your goal, right? Is to just pitch it, write books about it, have Hollywood make movies on it. You get a cut of that. He never tried to do that until, like I said, 14 years later, when people approached him and got the documents to be like free information, like you can do whatever you want with it. It wasn't classified anymore. He was not the one doing that. That's the weird part about this whole thing to me.
Well, here's something that could be even weirder about it, because that's a great point. If you're not trying to capitalize on it, you're not trying to get any money or what have you from it, then that actually that's in his favor. Right. And especially if he loses his job and his credibility, all that type of stuff. So that's definitely in his favor. But what if, okay, so let's say all of this was happening and he got to the point where he was in the tree or whatever. What if that was all like a hallucination?
It could have been that. It absolutely
could have been on shrooms.
Crap. Well, okay, we could go that way too. But what if
they're out in the forest hunting with bows and arrows?
That's true too. But what if it was a hallucination that was crafted by the alien intelligence? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, it could have been something, instead of making him black out with whatever agent they, gave to him or sent his way, or whatever. What if it was something to make him hallucinate and disorient him, and that's what he was seeing, but that's not exactly what it was. I mean, I'm just being extra crazy here as a possibility. To me, that if we went that direction, I would kind of be like, okay, well, maybe I can follow you there, because if, like I said, if it were actually happening, the idea of having a robot that looked somewhat like, that time, the era of time or whatever, or the Iron Giant or whatever, that's where it's kind of like, well, why? But if it was something to make him hallucinate and see something, from his own mind, like he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing and he saw something else, but he was actually being attacked or trying to be captive or whatever, I can maybe see that.
Well, let me add something to like what you said. The thing is too is that, well, one, the truth is always stranger than fiction, right? Like more times than not, the crazy story is the real story, and usually the one that's tame is the one that's nonsense. But like, even so, you got to keep in mind, like us, we, especially when you've had a traumatic experience, like you only use what you know. So
Mhm.
he might have saw this like robot or whatever it was, and it might have looked nothing like the Iron Giant. It might have looked nothing. It could have been something that was just crazy advanced, high tech, that he didn't know how to describe it,
Mhm.
and just it was like, oh, what have I seen that's familiar? And maybe not even purposely, just subconsciously. Like, how could, because you're always looking for descriptives, right? You're always looking to
Right.
compare it to something. You just saw some giant thing that like was able to like shoot gas or whatever, and he was like, oh, the Iron Giant, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
that's something that it could have been too. I mean, he may have very well seen something like that, and
Mhm.
he just didn't know how to describe it. Like
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
people don't know how to describe it. I mean, you see lots of people like have traumatic experiences and they're trying to describe what happened, and they don't, like, either don't have words, or they just describe stuff that has nothing to do with like what, like it's just like, what, like bees, like where do bees come from? And it's just because they're trying to figure out how to explain what the situation was, and they just don't know
Right.
how to explain
I
it.
wish instead of smoke, it was bees coming out of the robots now.
I mean-
That's what I'm getting from this. Craven, we haven't heard from you in a bit, my dude. How do you
Yeah.
feel about robots and smoke and aliens in the forest?
Well, certainly don't have to be an alien to blow smoke. We know that enough people blow smoke around every day. But no, I mean, guys, look, I mean, to me, when you start getting to all this level of detail, it's very much like I'm reading a book, or it's like a writer writing a story. And I think that, and you've already mentioned it, but the fact that this looks like what the sci-fi movies of the era looked like can't be ignored. I mean, that's huge in my mind. Uh, Whereas today, I bet you, if you audited all of these, alien claims that are out there, and the majority of them, at least, if not even higher than them, like way up there,
Mhm.
no one's going to say a metal robot now. They're going to be the little green men. They're going to be the weird shaped heads that you think of aliens. It's just, I think that's telling.
How do you
Now,
feel about the guy like ruining his life though? Like he ruined his life over
well,
this story. That's what I
yeah.
just don't know. That's where that's a gray area for me, I
Well,
guess.
you ever heard this? You ever heard it said that I believe that he believes what he saw.
Mhm.
And so just, but that doesn't make it true either, right? So like, there could have been a lot of things involved. I don't know. I personally haven't read up on this guy myself, right? So you probably know more than I do about him as a person, but what was his mental state? Was he a drug user, or user of something of, like you guys mentioned, hallucinogenics? I don't know. He may not have been.
He he wasn't, but what I will say is he did suffer from PTSD after the events of this. So I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
and don't
And
forget this is 1964. Medical
true.
science was
Yeah, yeah,
nowhere
yeah.
near where it is today.
Right.
He might have had something going on. We just
That's
we
true.
just might not know about it. So that's
That's
a
true.
possibility as well.
Yeah, I just get leery of like, I mean, you could, I guess I hear both sides of it because in some ways people say, well, the more details, the more chance it's true because it's very accurate. And that, I mean, and I understand that, but I also, again, when I hear such it just sounds like someone has sit down and wrote out a story. It just it's because it seems to me also if the aliens are this advanced, I've seen Star Trek, I've seen Star Wars. Now, and the funny thing is, and I love this about Star Wars. Of course, I know it's totally a movie, but when George Lucas has it start off by saying a long time ago, because we always think of the future of the aliens and like in a way in the distant past, and just that's pretty cool. But anyway, that's just a side note. But my thing is this: like, if these aliens are this advanced to be able to do what they do, poof out gas, do their little things, I suspect they are also capable of doing a brain wipe or making this guy forget what he saw or having some technology if we're so primitive to where their advancement level is.
Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, I mean, they would probably be like, you know what? Now, Men in Black uses the light, remember, in the movie? But something like that. So I'm like, I highly doubt they would let themselves be that exposed. If they're trying to be that hidden, they're not revealing themselves. Why are they going to let this dude remember everything? So I have a hard time believing that, too. That's another pebble in my shoe with this. So
I honestly, I kind of believe it's like just government like testing. Like that's kind of like after reading about it, I believe it was something like that, and like that.
Could be.
They were just hitting him with the smoke, just trying to be like, yeah, this guy's can't be seeing all this shit that we're doing out here. Like the more I read up about it, it just seems less like aliens, more like a government like conspiracy test thing. But I don't know.
Also,
that would fit.
People,
that would fit.
Man. Well, also like in like traumatic events. Well, first off, many people have ruined their lives for less, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
you say, Jake, like, oh, like, why would he ruin his life over this? A lot of people have ruined their life for it. And he might have done this with the assumption that he was going to change his life, and it just didn't happen. Nobody came knocking, right? It's hard to pursue something if there's nothing to pursue there. But as far as like, like when people have traumatic events, usually the more detailed, the more lie it is than the truth. Because like think of people that have had like traumatic experiences, they usually can't tell you. Like people that have been, or viciously attacked, so that they even at times will know exactly who the person is and can't even tell you who it was. Like it was their boyfriend, but they can't even describe or tell you the boy. They literally black out or
it's
just
defense mechanism, the brain.
Yeah, it's you're literally trying to shut it out. So usually when crazy experiences happen to people, that more times than not, they have no real details. It's like very generalized, or it's just kind of like there might be small details, but they don't have the full puzzle. They just have small little pieces rather than the full puzzle. Like this guy like had the full puzzle essentially start to finish. for like what happened. Also on a funny note, like when they were trying to figure out how to get him out of the tree, like the first thing, because I've heard this story before, and like I thought to say that I was like, reminds me of what was it, Scary Movie 3, where he's like, they invented time travel, or they invented space travel, but they can't open doors. Like that's what that reminded me of. Like I was just thinking, like they invented space travel, but they can't figure out how to get a guy out of a tree. Like I don't know, that's just,
well, that's what I'm saying.
That's a good point.
It's like, come on, man.
Like, but like, no, I mean, the real question is like, imagine if this did happen, like it really did happen to this guy, and you're him, and no one believes you. Everyone just thinks you're a nut, and this like really like, imagine if this like genuinely happened to you, and you're trying to tell everybody, and like even like nobody, your wife, your kids, your best friend, your parents, your everyone just thinks you're a Looney Tune. Just thought you got too high or did a bunch of drugs and stuff, and you're like, dude, no. Like, go ahead.
Paul, you and Paula just said the same thing about the drugs. I really don't think it was purposeful drug involvement, because like the guy's, he's a military guy. He worked for the government. I mean, he was like a welder, like building missiles and stuff. Like he just doesn't come off as the other side, like, there's a lot of groups of people in the 60s, right? He doesn't give me the stoner hippie, peace and love vibe that other people from this time period might. I just don't, I don't get that from Donald, the very few things I know about him. He loved hunting. He loved working for the government. I don't know. I don't see this guy, popping mushrooms or smoking a doobie going out into the woods. But maybe it could have been an accident, though. I mean, the dude was out
also
in the
woods.
woods.
60s, LSD was a big
right.
thing in the 60s.
That's what I was thinking.
That's what I'm saying. He might have gone out in the woods and ate the wrong mushrooms that were, happened to be growing out of some poop or whatever, and and fucked up. That's a possibility. And maybe it was just some bears, and he just saw smoke coming out of there. That's a possibility too. We got to consider all options here. The
whole smoke thing is interesting, man. Like, you almost picture like Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke movie where he's like, "Yo, man, this like robot alien, bro," and it like. Shot smoke out at me, dude, and you can almost like picture that, like,
what really happened is they were all
when the story went to that point, that's what was going on in my head. I was like, man, I was with you for a while there. I was like, this is like Close Encounters, and next thing you know, we go to Cheech and Chong. It was interesting.
Right.
He gets lost in the woods. He gets hungry. He might have just eaten some. It could happen. That's a possibility.
What probably happened is him and his buddies probably sat down, made a campfire or something like that. They all popped some acid, right? Took some LSD, got all high. He thought that they left, but really they were sitting there the whole time, and they're just lighting a joint, blowing smoke. He sees them as two robots, and they're just blowing smoke in his face, and he just keeps passing out, and they wake him up, and he thinks that they're trying to get him out of a tree, but really they're just trying to pick him off the ground.
And not only that,
I gotta get up.
And not only that, though, but instead of 12 hours, bro, it could have just been like 12 minutes of this whole event happening. Because when you get totally blitzed, man, time does not exist in the way it does for us right now. You know what I'm saying?
And there's two things about hallucinogenics and like fear too. Like these things don't mix very well. And when and here's the thing, like let's say he had taken accidentally eaten mushrooms that were, hallucinogenic mushrooms. First of all, like there's this thing about mushrooms and psychedelics in general that is just so oftentimes misconstrued, especially in 80s horror films, which like is almost frustrating. If you take mushrooms, I don't know this from experience. That's definitely not how I'm talking about this. If you take mushrooms, you don't just start seeing shit. You know what I mean? Just like you start to believe that things are different than how you're perceiving them. That's what's going on. Like you don't actually see dragons flying through the sky or whatever. They tell you don't look in the mirror when you're on mushrooms or LSD because you just get lost in it. You look at your own face and it doesn't look right. It's not because your face is actively changing. It's because your brain thinks it is. That's what the LSD is doing to you. So like what could have happened in this situation is this guy is, fucking high out of his mind. It's getting dark in a forest where he knows where there's bears and cats, and he's like freaking the fuck out. Fear also alters your mind in ways that is actually surprisingly similar to LSD and all that. Like fear makes you think that you're going to become prey to some predator no matter where you are. But being in the fucking woods where bears could rip you apart at any moment, you're going to be thinking about that. So that's a possibility. That is without a doubt a possibility. But I do feel like something happened because his buddies saw something too. That was a completely different situation. And the government was so extensive about searching the area. That's weird to me too. I feel like something happened, but it was blown out of proportions. Maybe it was a perfect storm.
Sounds good. All right. How about you, Fate, or Steven? One of you guys, if you want to share a story.
Craven, you said you had a story that you wanted to share.
Yeah.
Hey, Knight, why don't you hit that super chat real quick, and I'll take it from there.
Okay, we've got Radio Cosmic Rays coming in with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much. We appreciate you saying, yep, I believe in them. No way. We as humans are the only conscious beings in the damn galaxy. God did not just stop with creating humans. Okay. All right. We have another believer. Very nice. Right?
Yeah.
We'll have to give like a little clip. Believers in the house. Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate the super chat and all the support. Seriously, it makes a difference, and we appreciate you.
Absolutely appreciate it. And
thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's like I said earlier, it's at least possible, 100%. So there's a story that it's actually in my family, and the interesting thing is it happened to my grandma, who's no longer with us now, but it happened to her and my aunt, and when she was in her, I'm trying to remember how old she was at this time. She wasn't a kid. She was probably 17, 18. So she was more like late teens.
Hmm.
But she remembers it very vividly. And they never told anybody the story because they said people are going to think we're crazy. So they actually, on the opposite of this last guy who's sharing with the world, now and everything, they never said it. They only told us in the family. That was it.
Hmm.
Even to this day, she never talks about it. But she did tell me one time years ago about it because my dad had mentioned it a long time ago. And anyway, long story short, they lived in a little town called West Columbia. It's very out in the out in the way out in the middle of kind of out in the nowhere in Texas. And small town, lots of country, stuff. They lived on property. Well, anyway, it was my grandma was driving and my aunt was with her. They were on this dirt road, country road, and they were driving. I don't know where they were going, but they were driving out in the country road, dirt road, and it was dark. There's no street lights out, out in the country. It's just
Hmm.
the moonlight. But anyway, they were driving, and then all of a sudden, she said, out of nowhere, this like extremely bright white lights just went bam, like someone turned a light switch on above the car,
Hmm.
and it was above them. And she said grandma immediately like hit the brakes because we already freaked them out. She stops the car and completely, and she said we both looked up from the windshield, look up, and she said it was a round shaped vessel, and it had white lights all the way around the bottom facing down, and it was hovering like a helicopter, but it was silent. There was no sound,
Hmm.
and it was just hovering over their car. And she said we completely froze in fear. And she said that it stayed there for like 5 or 6 minutes and nothing happened. It just stayed there with the lights on the car. And then all of a sudden, she said the thing went like out, like in front, and then gone. Like I mean, just crazy fast, like a streak. It was so
Hmm.
fast, and that was gone. It was back to just dark country road again.
Wow.
And that happened to them. And that would have been this would have been I'm trying to think when this would have been decade
I,
wise.
I was just wondering that.
Yeah, we're talking about late 50s.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
late 50s, maybe early 60s. Um, but more likely that would have been like late 50s, and that was it. They just
Mm.
and then they basically never told a soul.
Wow.
Never told anybody but just us. My dad, just the family. That was it. But they said they never saw anything like that since then. Ever, never happened
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
It's the only time it ever happened, and that was it. It just hovered not very high above the car,
Yeah.
and then it just went like straight out where they could just see the circular white lights,
Hmm.
and then like shot straight up.
Now, two things about that. First of all, that's an amazing story. But two things about that story really hit me based upon when this happened, because that's what I was wondering. When did this happen? Was
Hmm.
this the 80s? Was it the 70s? But you're saying is in the 50s. The
Late
two
50s,
things
yeah.
that stand out to me is when they described it as hovering with absolutely no sound.
Yeah.
Now any and of course I wasn't around back then, but I'm saying if you look at any of the things that were out there, whether it was in books or even the movies and stuff, there's always that sound that it makes, and whatever. So
Mm.
there was no sound,
Mm-mm.
Also, the second thing that really strikes me as interesting is the way that they described its movement, because
Mhm.
again, back then, just going by what was around in pop culture and so forth, you didn't see the crafts move like that. You know what I mean? They kind of moved, or they they
Mhm.
hovered, or they moved fast. But you're saying it moved in one direction and then kind of like
Yeah,
that,
like that.
which
Then up, gone.
which is so interesting because and I won't get into this today. This could be for another time, or maybe even when we get into another episode of this. But when you look at that evidence that was found by the government from like Commander Fravor, and that video of a supposed craft, that's
Mm.
exactly how that craft moved, which was so odd to everyone that saw the actual video. They're like, how could anything on this earth move like that? As far as we know, right? Of
Right.
course, like you guys said earlier, technology is way further than what we know about, and that's how we stay ahead of the curve and so forth. But that being said, what they
Mhm.
saw in this video was movement unlike anything that was possible with our current technology, or even technology that they could fathom years later. So when you said that about your grandmother,
Yeah.
about how it moved, and this was the 50s,
Mhm.
all I can say is wow.
Yeah.
That's a really compelling story to me,
Yeah.
hearing it from you.
And of course, knowing my grandma, and of course, then when she was alive, and knowing my aunt still to this day, still with us, these people are, these are not sensationalists, the kind of people sometimes you associate with crazy stories, right?
Yeah.
We all, and you know what I'm talking about. Just there's a type that we
hmm
sometimes see consistently. That's not the case, man.
mm
They are the most grounded people in the world, and in case in point, they never told anybody. They
Right.
made like they said,
Yeah.
we're not telling anybody about this. So they're gonna think we're nuts. So they never told
Right.
a soul.
Right. Well, what do you, just as a quick question, what do you think of that story? Like, how do you, as far as what you believe, what you don't believe, and
Hmm.
so forth?
Me, well, first of all, I totally believe them because of I know, because I know. I mean,
Right. hmm
I understand their the kind of people that they are and were.
hmm
So I never doubted what they said. It was true.
hmm
I always the biggest question for me was this a government vessel
hmm
or not, or was it of this earth or not of this earth? And I know the kind of movement that we're talking about here, we don't see anything like that. At least that's not in our purvey or our
hmm
view.
Right.
So maybe it is in a very small inner circle of government classified folks that maybe they know of something like this. Maybe they figured out some stealth technology, but yeah, I don't. That was always my question: was this some type of a advancement we've created and it's under class and it's still classified, or was it what they interpreted it to be, which was they didn't know. They just
hmm
know what they saw,
Right.
and we've never seen anything like that since. Still to this day, like in the government anyway, that they've
Mm.
released this. So I believe they saw it. I just don't know what the origin of it was,
Right.
if it's earthly or not.
Mm.
That's how I've
Wow.
always cashed out on it. Yeah.
That is
It is. That's
crazy.
interesting.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting,
Um.
man.
Yeah. I. It. Who was it? Said Sarah, I think, said that there's something special about the 50s
hmm
Hmm.
and aliens. I think a lot of that was just just the time, right? We weren't as industrialized. We were kind of coming into that as we are now.
hmm
Also, I think just a lot more recluses in the
Excuse
middle
me.
of nowhere. Like you always hear these stories, it's always like in a dark, like back road. Like it's never in a populated city, right? Because if you were going
Right.
to be taking people and you were going to be abducting people, you ain't going to do it in the middle of Times Square. You're going to do
Right.
it,
Hmm.
off the offset. I I'm not going to share the story I was going to share because it take too long and we're about to wrap up. But
Mm.
one thing that I will chime in about the 1950s, which I think is funny, and I can go into more detail in a later video if everyone wants. But back in the 1950s, the U.S. I think it was the Navy funded. It was funded by the Navy to create a real life flying saucer. Like they built it too. It was like Project. I think it was like Project 1794 or something like that. Something like that. I might be wrong on that, but basically they like I said, I can go in more detail in another video. But basically, they in the 1950s they created a real life flying saucer, and the idea was they wanted to use it to attack the Soviets, and they wanted to use it to attack the Soviets so that way the U.S. was, hands clean. They wanted to basically stage a alien invasion on the Soviets. So the Soviets thought UFOs and aliens did it, so they tried to create these UFO flying, like your typical flying. So there's blueprints and stuff because it's been declassified since then. But there's literally like images. It was a real flying UFO flying saucer that they built to a T of like everyone's stories and everything. The only reason they never went through with it is they couldn't fly it. So they could get it off the ground, but they couldn't balance it. It had no real balance. They couldn't figure out how to actually get the thing to fly. So they ended up scrapping it. That's the Cliff Note version of the story. But basically, the U.S. literally made a flying saucer to try to create a alien invasion to attack the Soviets. And the only reason they didn't go through with it is because they couldn't figure out how to fly a UFO. So fun fact. Like I said, if you want the full in-depth story, do you want us to talk about it, all of us, let us know in the comments after this video. Leave a comment in the video.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we'll do that for another day. Help boost some engagement. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Alrighty, well, guys, we're gonna get ready to wrap up here. This was really, really cool. Some interesting stuff. Some seriously very, very interesting. We could do this for a long, long time. I think, like Jake was saying earlier. For you guys in the live chat, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Though we appreciate that as well. And like Fate said, let us know in the comment section. Would you like us to continue, some more of this particular conversation? Let us know. But also, you guys have a lot of different great stories that you were talking about in the comments too. Let us know in the comment section. We can continue those discussions as well. Also, we do want to thank for you guys that are here that are part of our channel membership program. I think the link was put up earlier in the live chat, but definitely if you'd like to become a channel member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. Become part of the channel, helps support us, keeping the lights on and so forth. Thank you so much, Stephen. We've got the link right there. Much appreciated. And you can also help to craft, no pun intended, our future streams and videos with different suggestions, just like Julie has. And I know we have another one I think that we're going to be working on as well. So thank you guys so much for considering becoming a member of the Lethal Collective channel membership. So I think that's where we'll stop, guys. Thank you so much. And we will catch you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. The collective has spoken. Peace out and keep looking to the skies. See you.
Bye, guys.